Do you miss the golden era of professional wrestling? Wrestling fans, it's time to bring those memories back to life. To take you back to the legendary arenas, the chair shots, the foreign objects, good versus evil, all the heroes you loved, and the villains you love to hate, and the blood. Guiding us on this journey through professional wrestling history, IBW Hall of Famers Supermouth Dave Drayson and Terry Sullivan. International Big Time Wrestling and RoX-TV proudly presents Big Time Memories.
Big Time Memories is back. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Terry Sullivan. This is Dave Drayson, and we've got more stories from the road and the ring today.
Yeah, our stories. I mean, besides the stuff that we know and the stuff that we research and, our personal stories, which, people enjoy because they've never heard them before.
Right.
A lot of our stories, have never been told before.
Absolutely.
It's like, we've always kept them locked up and, now is our vehicle to give them to the fans, give them what they want. And hopefully they're enjoying, what they're hearing from us.
I think they are. Yeah.
And, today, this is gonna be a fun episode, I hope. It should be, because it's a guy who not only was a wrestler, but he was like equal, famous for being a manager.
Sure.
And he was a character, no doubt about it. And that would be George Cannon.
Man Mountain, Crybaby Cannon. Yeah. He's just an unforgettable part of Detroit wrestling history and wrestling in general.
Right. George Cannon, his real name was George MacArthur, and he was born March 28th, 1932. And he was born in Montreal. He was always Canadian.
Multilingual?
Yes.
Oh.
Spoke fluent French and English.
Oh, wow.
And as a kid, he was a great athlete. He played baseball, he played football, and of course, in Canada, he played hockey. And he was a stout, kid. He wasn't overly big like, we remember him.
Yeah.
But he played the lineman. A lineman in the Canadian Football League for the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
I never knew that.
Very short time.
And just see him as this little roly-poly 400-pound guy, and it's hard to see him like behind a hockey net or on a football field.
Yeah, well, he was a lineman, and the linemen, the poor guys, their knees take a beating.
Yeah.
And he only lasted in the league very shortly, and he got out, and because of bad knees. But he was always fascinated with the sport of professional wrestling. Always loved it. Went to shows in Montreal as a kid, and loved it. And he got his chance he made his debut in 1953 in a tag match. And of all things, we're going to bring up Brute Bernard's name again. But I remember George telling me that when his very first match, when they were training him, training, moves and counter moves and stuff, but they never smartened him up to the business. They didn't tell him that, it's a work, it's not real. And his very first match, I remember George telling me this, I think it was Brute Bernard and Skull Murphy against George Cannon, and I'm forgetting his tag team partner. But his tag team partner goes in first. The bell rings, his partner, and Skull Murphy's beating on him. Brute Bernard's beating on him. And George is, he's like excited on standing on the ring apron. Can't wait to get in, can't wait to get in. And finally his tag team partner tags him. He gets in the ring and he's like wailing on Brute Bernard and Skull Murphy. I mean, he's giving haymakers out. It's like they're giving, what the hell's wrong with this kid? You know, so they pushed him and made him tag out. You know, and he never got back in the ring, and they got him back in the dressing room and sort of giving him the businesses. You know, what the hell? Yeah, they smartened him up real quick.
Yeah, I'll bet they did.
So George said his first match, he had no idea it was all a work.
Heaven's sakes, that's an interesting story.
And that was in Japan.
Oh, in Japan.
Yeah,
wow.
He made his debut in Japan.
Oh.
And aliases, we had, George Cannon, we had Crybaby Cannon,
right, yeah.
Man Mountain Cannon, Crybaby Harris.
Crybaby Harris?
Yeah, wow. I think because of Tony Two-Ton Harris, he was playing off of that for a while. Crybaby Cannon, of course. And of all things, a lot of people don't know this. He wore a mask in Montreal and did a version of the Zebra Kid for a very short while.
Well, the real Zebra Kid, George Bullis, sort of looked like Cannon if you added another 1.5 feet in height.
Yep.
Wow.
Interesting. Now, do you know how he got the Crybaby moniker?
Pretty much, but tell us.
Well, he had the ability to, make these faces, and there was a lot of times in the dressing room, when he'd go to a new territory, he'd sit there and he'd tell one of the other wrestlers to tell this wrestler that he was Jackie Mason, the famous comedian, because he looked just like him. And these guys would come up to him and, Jackie, I love you. Can I get your autograph? And George is signing, and then, that was the rib on the guys. But he had the penchant to be able to close his eyes and produce tears. So at this, time, I don't know what match or what started it, but, during the match, one of the, his opponent would, give him a couple punches to the stomach and stuff like that, and he'd fall back.
Looking good for him, and
he'd fall back into the ring corner or into the center of the ring, and he'd sit there and he'd start crying like this, and the crowd would go nuts. They ate that up. I
remember watching him when I was a kid, and he was Man Mountain Cannon. But when he would come out, the chant would start, "Cry baby, cry baby," and he hated it.
Yeah, well, it's almost like, the Bull Curry, he was always, hoo-ah, hoo-ah, holding his ears, or the Crazy Brooks when that came out, so everybody had their, little thing that, not drawing heat, giving the fans what they want.
Sure.
And George made his Detroit debut on November 9th, 1955, at the Olympia Stadium versus Sealy Samara. And he took the loss, but that was his first foray into the Detroit territory. He worked for also Burt Ruby's Motor City Wrestling, and was it Hal Light or Al? Harry Light?
Yeah, Harry Light.
Who had, it was...
Hal was the referee, that's his son. Yeah, Harry
They
Light.
had matches every week or every 2 weeks at the Chesterfield Arena in what at that time was East Detroit. It was a 2-level gymnasium really, and they had the wrestling on the second floor.
Oh wow.
And George was a mainstay there. Lou Klein also worked there. So many other guys that, I can't remember all of them at this time.
Probably Sheik, I think, appeared there.
As he appeared there as the Sheik of Araby.
Kalmakoff was around a lot,
So many guys worked the Chesterfield Arena, which no longer exists. They stopped having wrestling there at one point, I think in the very early 60s, because the place burnt down. Yeah. And now it's some cheap Italian restaurant or something like that, one of those chain,
But all these guys that we know were there when they were brand new, when they were basically rookies, just breaking in.
Even guys like Hardboiled Haggerty, Brute Bernard worked there, so many guys, So this was in his early days, working, at the Chesterfield Arena.
And they had the big national guys come in too, the nationally touring champions and things like that.
Mm-hmm. But he made his big-time wrestling debut on May 29th, 1965, the week after the Sheik bought the territory from Doyle and Barnett. And his tag team partner was Roy Fryman, and he went against Fred Curry and Gino Brito.
Interesting.
Yeah,
but I bet you Freddie and George must have wrestled each other hundreds and hundreds of times over the years.
I bet you they did.
Yeah.
And you know, they probably enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
You know, Fred was a great talent, George was a great talent, and I'm sure at some point in time Fred made him cry.
I bet you more than once. Yeah.
You know, and you've got, you know, some places that George wrestled, you know, throughout his career.
He was one who made it around the country, is quite successful in a number of places, Chicago, Calgary. He appeared in Madison Square Garden in 1965. He did a lot of dates for McMahon on the East Coast. He was a big star there. Madison Square Garden, a lot of the other towns as well. Charlotte, he was in Minneapolis, Virginia, he was in Dallas. Let's see, 62 Dallas, that would have been before Fritz, but he had some good matches there, good run there. Kansas City, Georgia, Hawaii, Pittsburgh, Vancouver, the Pacific Northwest. Did a couple of tours of Japan as well.
Yeah.
So he got around. He was well known, well regarded.
And then he worked the AWA also for Vern Gagne.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was in 1968, if I'm not, early 1968. Because at 1968, the summer of, to 1970, he went out to L.A. And he lived there, you know, for almost that whole year and a half. And he was a monster heel in L.A. at the time. And at one point, just because, you know, George, the way George is, you know, he's, you know, a very multi-talented person. He had a variety show in L.A. I think it was on KTLA TV. You know,
that was the wrestling channel.
Right.
But you know, if you look up Wikipedia or things like that, they say that Cannon had a variety show. But you went to one of the authoritative sources of Los Angeles wrestling.
Yeah, Jeff Walton.
Yeah, Tux Newman.
Tux Newman as a manager. Yeah.
And you asked him about this variety show, but
well, Jeff is up in years, and his son Scott, he'll vouch for me on that one. But no, Jeff is a great guy, great historian. Worked in the L.A. office, and I was fortunate in 1973, the summer, to go out to L.A. and work in the office with him, Don Wilson, Larry Korn, Bob Kubik. Oh God! So many other guys. Mike LaBelle.
The idea of George Cannon hosting a variety show just doesn't ring right with me. And Jeff said he thought it might be the Beat the Champ segment that they did on KTLA Wrestling, because Cannon was the champ.
I think that was separate, because the Beat the Champ thing would have been on the wrestling channel,
right?
And what we're talking about, George Cannon was the first Beat the Champ champion. What they would do as the champion every week, he didn't have an opponent to, go against. So they brought out a big wheel, and they had all the wrestler names on there, and he'd spin the wheel, and that's who he'd go against that day, for Beat the Champ. I don't know if there was a gimmick thing like at carnivals and stuff where the thing would stop at a certain name,
Probably so.
Yeah, probably. Who knows? But, that was the Beat the Champ thing.
Yeah.
Also, he did a thing where he claimed to have the strongest stomach. So besides the Beat the Champ thing, he had the strongest stomach challenge.
Oh.
They'd have one of the guys come out, punch him, kick him, whatever, and George would, take it and, just laugh it off. He'd always come out ahead.
Yeah.
And then they'd, brought in, for this one show, Bobo Brazil.
And this is L.A.?
Yes, still in L.A. And like I said, George was one of the top heels at that time. So Bobo Brazil, accepts the challenge, the, strong stomach challenge. And I believe there's a photograph of Bobo Brazil cocoa butting George in the stomach and losing that challenge, And it was shortly after that, he ended up leaving L.A. and coming back home, to Canada and, big time wrestling here.
Interesting. As we said, he wrestled for McMahon in the WWF in the 60s. Some of the people he went against, a few names that people know: Gorilla Monsoon, the Kentucky Butcher, Virgil, Toro Tanaka, Professor Tanaka, and Baron Cicluna. So yeah, he was quite well regarded on the East Coast.
Yeah, but when he came back to big time wrestling here, not only he wrestled, a number of times, never main events, but he was a mid card guy and always entertaining. Fans loved to hate him.
But he had the bad knees. So I don't think wrestling was really top of his priority list.
Well, when you
actual physical matches.
Well, when you had a 72-inch waist, my knees would hurt too.
Yeah, right.
But not being able to wrestle all the time, and certain tag teams needed a mouthpiece, because the Kangaroos, Al Costello and Don Ken at the time, kind of a boring interview.
Yeah.
Kurt Von Hess, Karl von Schatz, talked German stuff, but they really didn't want them talking on TV, so they had to have a mouthpiece, and George fit the role perfectly.
And you need somebody to stir things up at ringside.
Oh,
nobody
could he
better
stir
than
things
that.
up? Yeah.
Yeah. The
when
Kangaroos, he'd come with a boomerang and beat the boomerang on the side of the ringer in somebody's head.
Well, remember, he had the helmet.
Yeah.
He had that helmet. At least he wore the helmet with the Kangaroos. It had a kangaroo on it.
Yeah.
And his picture was on the boomerangs that Al Costello would always throw out. But he always had that blue jacket on, and what was on the back of that jacket?
We ought to have T-shirts made. I am right.
Yeah, Terry and Dave, big time memories. I am right.
Yeah.
But we're known as the other guys by those other guys. But he excelled at managing. Like we said, the Kangaroos, Von Hess and Von Schatz. Made them tag team champions.
Yeah.
And it was in 1975. Like, we talked about earlier in another episode that he went to the IWA. He was the booker for Eddie Einhorn's promotion, the IWA. He was a wrestler there. He managed. He was a booker. He managed the Mongols, Eric the Red, who I managed, previously.
Did he do the Love Brothers too?
I believe so at some point.
Yeah.
And then, being that manager and the booker and, things, he was recognized by PWI, Professional Wrestling Illustrated, as the Manager of the Year in 1975.
And this was a big-time promotion, too. This was intended to be a national promotion. They did crack the New York market. They ran, Roosevelt Stadium?
Yep.
In opposition to McMahon, which was just unheard of, basically.
Big show in Greensboro, North Carolina. I remember that.
Concentrated mostly in the Crockett territory.
Right.
Mid-Atlantic,
And then this would have been 1975 because you and I were involved with the UWA, the Universal Wrestling Association. I was managing, you were doing television commentary, and at first you were doing commentary with Milt of Ruskin, right?
That's right, yeah. I think that lasted 2 times. I think we did 2 tapings. We taped at the University of Windsor.
Yeah.
Had a fantastic studio there and equipment and everything. And this is right when George and Milt were getting together and ready to start what must have evolved into their Superstars of Wrestling. But Milt was brand new to the business. He was a lawyer, and he wasn't very well thought of because he had a big mouth. And sometimes in professional wrestling, when you're around the wrestlers and the veterans, it's a good idea to zip it.
Yep.
And Milt learned that pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, keep your eyes open and your mouth shut.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, because, very shortly after, our UWA was, going down in a way, but we had the TV. George Cannon, stepped in with Milt and rebranded it as Superstars of Wrestling.
Yeah.
And as Superstars of Wrestling, we moved the TV studio up to Toronto, and Don Mills, I forget the company that the TV station was, but it wasn't only Ontario. They went from ocean to ocean, from Atlantic to Pacific.
Global TV?
Global TV,
that
exactly.
Was the network.
Yeah.
Sort of like the ESPN, only
Yeah, so, I was, fortunate to, be managing up there.
Yeah.
I was managing Hartford Love and Bruce Swayze, Eric the Red, Ricky Cortez at one point, and so many other guys. And my God, I'm on TV every week.
And
all
national,
across Canada.
But it was still pretty much the territorial days, and that was respected to a great degree. The Montreal people had their thing going. Stu Hart out in Calgary, right, and then the Al Zink in Newfoundland around there. So Cannon really didn't expand nationally to a great extent, did he?
On TV, he did, yes.
Well, on TV,
but booking house shows,
right.
No. Because I remember our first house shows, we went against the Tunnies. We had the Canadian National Exhibition. We had that arena, and we had Lou Thez, Bull Curry, Louis Martinez, so many greats. But when, Tunney found out about it, he ran a show against us, to take some of the fans away.
Yeah.
But we still had a great show, and George was running other towns like Cobourg, Ohsweken, all throughout Ontario, and drawing great houses.
I'm surprised with the national TV exposure, some of these other promoters didn't send some talent in now and then, not only to help George, give him some new faces, but also to expose their talent nationally.
Over time, going up to like 1980, he was bringing in Haystack Calhoun and so many other great. Bull Curry was coming in. God, there was so many others that were coming in for his shows.
Mm-hmm.
The Sheik even made an appearance.
Yeah.
And, with Eddie Creechman as his manager, he came on to George's shows against the Tunnies of all things.
Yeah.
And so, we did tapings in Toronto. We also went up to Montreal and started doing tapings there, which, in another segment, I'm going to have to tell my going up to Montreal story in a snowstorm with
Louis Martinez.
Don Ross, and Frenchie Martin.
This is a classic.
But that's a long story. In another episode, we'll tell that on another segment. But also, I got to tell this one. Our very first TV taping that we did in Toronto, me and George went up together. So I would drive over to Windsor to his house, and then I'd drive his car up there. He had his big Cadillac.
Sure, yeah, I remember
So,
that.
We'd be going up and he'd be doing, work and, in the car and asking me, my opinion. And I was asking him because I was really still a rookie manager.
Yeah.
I was asking him, what should I do in my promos? And he was helping me, develop, my character and, what to do and what to say. So we stayed our first night. This would have been a Saturday because we did TV tapings on Sunday. We would tape 4 shows. So on Saturday, we'd check into the Chelsea Hotel, right off of Yonge Street, very fancy. And, so me and George were sharing a room. So we went out, had dinner, came back to the room, and there was this new show on TV that I heard about because it wasn't showing in the Detroit market yet. And it was the second or third show in the series, and it was called Saturday Night Live.
Oh no!
In its very first, season, 1975.
So Channel 4 wasn't showing it in Detroit?
No, they didn't pick it up yet.
Well, it was pretty controversial when it first started.
It was, and new.
Yeah.
But they ended up, picking it up at
Yeah.
a point. But anyway, so I say to George, oh wow, I heard about this show. It's supposed to be pretty funny. So, we're sitting there and we're watching the show. And the host of that show was Richard Pryor.
Oh, wow.
So if you remember that show, me and George, we're enjoying it, we're laughing and stuff. And then one of the very opening segments was a thing with Chevy Chase and Richard Pryor. And it was like they were doing a word association thing.
Yeah, I've seen this.
So it was like, Chevy Chase would, say a word, Richard Pryor would retort back. And, I don't remember the whole skit and stuff, but
They were somewhat racially insensitive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, at one point, well, here I'll say, Chevy Chase goes, honky. And he goes, Richard Pryor, retorts, honky. Well, honky, honky, honky. And then Chevy Chase says, the N-word.
No.
And Richard Pryor's retort was, dead honky. At that point, when he said dead honky, this is what I heard. Boom! George Cannon is laughing so darn hard, he fell off the bed. And he was wedged in between his bed and mine. And now we're both laughing our behinds off, and he can't get up. How do you get a 450-pound guy out from between two beds? And you're laughing like two schoolgirls.
I got a Laurel and Hardy image going here.
Oh, it was so funny. We laughed and laughed. And, to this day, that's one of the funniest, pieces I had with George.
Wow, that's a great story. Yeah.
And he also, sold a lot of stuff, through the TV. He had his radio show that he had.
Right,
He did his TV.
Pictures and
he'd sell pictures and stuff like that. But what was the line he always used?
Well, he was selling these things. Send a self-addressed stamped envelope and don't forget the money.
Because people would. And that was at a day when, there weren't checks and, the things that you can get at a bank to send. You would send $1 or $1.50 in an envelope and didn't have to worry about the mailman ripping it off on you. And then, George, doing the commentary, for his Superstars of Wrestling and stuff. And at one point, this would have been 1980, right about the end of big-time wrestling in Detroit here. And things were going bad and sour. And Louis Martinez and Ron Martinelli started a promotion. They were on it, myself, I was managing Blackjack Luca. Fred Curry came in. Jimmy Hines, our good friend.
Bobby Eaton.
Bobby Eaton came in. Crazy Bobby Eaton, he was known as.
Right,
and we just had, a nice little promotion. And to try to help us out, how do we get the word around to Detroit about because we had it at the Fraser Hockeyland Arena. That's where we were at. And how do you get your, wrestling fans to know? Because there was no internet or anything in those days.
Right.
So we asked George, would you cut a couple promos for us? And we're going to buy time, commercial time, on the Sheik's Big Time Wrestling Show. So, what kind of heat we got for that. And George did. Yeah. So George, on his, one foray up in, Toronto doing, his Superstar show, he cut, 2 promos for us. One, on its own, running down the card, and he had Louis Martinez on one. And I hope we might be able to find those somewhere on the internet. I think I have them that we could show you fans those interviews here, that we bought, time on Sheik's TV. Ooh. And it really helped because we almost sold Fraser Hockeyland out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, we had a great card and a great show. And that was, George helped us out there.
That must have been at the bitter end of big time wrestling.
Yeah, this was 1980, so it was the very final year.
We were probably running reruns at that point in time.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
But like I said, George, was Canadian, and he lived in Windsor. And at one point, he had a wrestling school with
George did?
Yeah, with Al Costello. Really? Somewhere on the west side of Detroit, where Al lived, because I think, if I remember correctly, I don't remember the address, but he lived on Braille Street.
Costello did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the street signs, they had all little dots on it and stuff. So if you can, no, I'm just kidding there. But so I would always go over to George's house in Windsor. There was there's times that I'd come over for dinner. We'd sit in the back and just sit on lounge chairs in the summertime and drink sodas. And we would listen to Tiger games, Detroit Tiger baseball. George loved that. There was a time George asked if I can help him out because you can't have him give up on a ladder. I helped him paint his house at one point. He had this great basement, with a bar down there, but it was unfinished. So I ended up helping him put up paneling. I would do all the nailing and stuff, and he would do all the cutting and sawing. So
supervising?
So that was, stuff that I did with George. Right. And he had a pool. He had a pool in his backyard. Very nice. So I remember, there was times I'd, come over his house. He's, in his pool. But there was this one time I'm over the house, and he invites me over, and this was like April, late April, maybe early May. He's going to take the tarp off the pool and open up the pool. So it's like, okay, I'll give you a hand. So the only way to get it off, because there was a lot of water sitting in the middle of this tarp from rain or snow or whatever. So George gets in the pool, or takes the steps down. Once he got all the way in, we're starting the tarp. Well, that water below that tarp was cold as a beet. It was cold. It was really cold. And George is like, he's like this, and he's like, get me out. And it's like, what do you mean? What? Because his teeth were chattering. He's like cold as hell, and he had to get out. He couldn't stand it anymore. And now, how do I drag a 450-pound guy, over the side of the pool? And I'm trying to tell him, go back toward the steps, walk up the steps. So he goes toward the steps, and I grabbed his hand and held onto the railing. I got him out of the pool. But poor George, he was a laugh a minute.
Good old George. Yeah, he used to crack me up at ringside. He'd keep up basically a running commentary of sorts during the matches, just trying to make me laugh, which didn't take much.
Yeah. But, whenever I went over to Windsor for him and going through the tunnel, I always had to stop at the duty-free for him. I'd always have to get him a carton of De Maurier cigarettes and a liter of Canadian Club.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Was he a smoker?
His wife was.
Oh,
His wife, Jill. We were talking about road incidents and stuff with George. Another one that just pops into my mind. We're going up to Toronto, the Toronto area for a show, for a house show. So anyway, his wife packs him a sandwich. So, waiting for me to get over, from Detroit to Windsor, and, by the time I got there, and now we're unloading my car, my gear and stuff, putting in his car. Well, he put the sandwich on his dashboard. And, well, I guess with the sunshine and stuff, because it had mayonnaise in it. So we get to maybe London, Ontario, and George starts eating this sandwich. And within like 10 minutes, he's got to go to the bathroom real bad. I guess this mayonnaise turned, sour, whatever they call it. And it seemed like it took us so long to get to our destination, because every 10 minutes, George is having to get out on the side of the road. And just, nonchalant, not really challantly or nonchalantly, he just had to drop his drawers right on the highway.
Oh, my God.
So that bad sandwich incident stuck in my mind. But like I said, besides the superstars of wrestling, always great commentator, he also had a radio show.
That's right.
And
remember that.
Yeah, and people can call in, fans could call in, and it was all about wrestling.
And people used to call him Crybaby, and he'd get mad for real. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it about the Crybaby thing that he hated later on in his career?
I don't know. It's like,
unless he positioned himself as the big fancy announcer, executive kind, and Crybaby was derogatory. Because people still talk about.
Well, it'd be like people calling me Supermouth now. When I was the wrestling thing. I endeared it. Now it doesn't bother me, but the term of endearments. Hey, but I get it. Sometimes I'll be in my hometown, and someone will come up right out of the street and just ask for my, hey, Supermouth, how you doing? Or, a car rolling down its window and some guy yelling, hey, Supermouth, how you doing? It's like,
hey, about that money you owe me.
Well, yeah. Bye, I'm not Superman. But yeah, there's times I'd be over his house, like I said, he had his radio show, or him doing bookings. We'd be in the basement and I'd be on the typewriter typing up the lineup, for the program, for whatever city, we were going to. And he'd be on the phone constantly, talking to Gino Brito, Lou Thez, Hartford Love, Eric, and he's talking. And it's like, and this is, like 1980,
And you paid by the minute.
Early, paid, and especially Canada calling to the United States and stuff. Yeah. I couldn't imagine his phone bill. But then he'd be talking on the phone, and then he'd have a pen and he's drawing. And it's like, after he'd get off the phone, he'd hand me the drawing. And it's like, oh my God, it's me in the cartoon in some vulgar position with another wrestler like Igor or Tony Marino or somebody like that, and it's like, and I still have them to this day.
Really?
They are funny, but I'm sorry, we can't show those on Big Time Memories here. But those cartoons I always loved.
I bet. Yeah.
Now some very exciting news. There is a new wrestling faction in Michigan, and the home of the professional wrestling in Michigan will now be the Hockey Land in Fraser, Michigan.
Well, after Big Time died, he was the first one to bring wrestling back to Cobo.
Exactly. And for the Crockett's, because they were, bringing in Ric Flair, Jimmy Snuka, all those guys that were working in, the Crockett area at the time, so he was doing that. And it wasn't that much later that, once the, WWF was starting to expand, and they were buying up territory after territory, well, they ended up buying up the Mid-Atlantic territory. And then Vince McMahon had George working for him, setting up the shows and, helping him out as like the local, promoter.
You mean here in Detroit?
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too long that Vince McMahon pulled his, we'll say the Detroit screw job. He ended up screwing George Cannon big time, cutting him right out. And,
what happened?
I don't know. He just cut him out.
I remember George doing promos on WWE TV.
Yep. And then just one day, just like, hey, we don't need you no more. We can take over. We can run this ourselves.
So maybe McMahon probably got TV time that was no longer George's, because initially he depended on Channel 9, right?
Right.
But then he ended up on Channel 7, Channel 2, Channel 50.
Yep.
So at that stage, probably didn't need George anymore.
Didn't need him. But still, it's like, bad to cut somebody loose like that.
Sure.
And, not pay him and say, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
We can do it without you.
Yeah.
But just after that, George's health started to take a bad turn. We know he weighed at least 450. It could have been more, And in 1972, he made the last known appearance that we know about at the Cauliflower Alley Club out in L.A., and that would have been in 1992.
There you go, yeah.
And we have a picture of George attending this, and it was shocking to see him well under 200 pounds.
Yeah, I didn't even recognize him.
Yeah, I couldn't have recognized him at all. I mean, besides the curly hair, and he didn't have the beard anymore or anything. But I mean, he looked good, but we didn't know that he had lost so much weight and was in really poor health.
What was he suffering from?
Cancer.
Oh.
Yeah, because he died of throat cancer and phlebitis.
Oh boy.
And he passed away on July 1st, 1994. And
62. Wow.
A lot of guys are, don't make it to 70.
Yeah.
A lot of our friends and wrestlers, guys that we feature, the Stomper, and
it's a tough life.
It
really
is a tough life. The pounding that they take and the road travel, and takes a toll on your body, and mentally and physically.
Sure.
But like I said, George was a great guy, a great friend, always accommodating, always liked to, talk to the fans, even though he was a heel, he always liked to, talk to the fans,
Very
sign autographs.
smart.
Yeah.
Very smart guy. I remember in the dressing room, he was always reading magazines and always reading whatever it was, Time magazine or whatever, and very well versed in current events. And
Now, there's a thing that just popped into my head that we didn't talk about. Do you know he took over Wrestling Review magazine at one point?
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I forgot all about that.
He was a writer, I remember, for various magazines.
Yeah, because when Norm Keitzer and Jim Melby, they sold it, to George. George was involved with this publishing company in Montreal. So the magazine, the face of it went to Montreal. George did a lot of the writing, still had some of the writers that, wrote for many years. But the magazine really was going downhill, and it didn't last that long. And, not until, our good friend Brian Buchanan revived it in, the early 2000s and did 14 issues. And, we'll have to talk about that on another episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, George, George
Wrestling
ran,
Review.
Yeah,
Wow.
probably the greatest wrestling magazine.
I was just thinking, the standard bearer.
Yeah. That or Ring Wrestling, both were great.
Right.
The after magazines, as entertaining as they were more on the fantasy side.
Yeah.
Great nonetheless, and another good friend of ours, Bill Apter.
Great pictures, no doubt about that.
But going back to George, a card, a character, great guy, and as like we always do, Terry, could you give one last ring announcement for our good friend George Cannon?
Yeah, with pleasure. Do you remember where we used to introduce him from? Ladies and gentlemen, from County Cork, Ireland, weighing 375 pounds, George Man Mountain Cannon.
I'm really proud to say that I'm a part of IBW.
I take pride in IBW that we are a family-run company.
It's a fight. It's a sport. At IBW, tradition has always mattered.
You're going to see world-class professional big-time wrestling at its best.
This ain't no sports entertainment. This is professional wrestling.
International Big Time Wrestling's The Fix. Each and every week, your fix of IBW action. You want entertainment? Look no further than RoX-TV. International Big Time Wrestling!
Wrestling fans, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also don't forget to ring that bell.